Welcome, listener, to another episode of Spam, Spam, Spam Humbug. This is episode 135 of the podcast, and we have another interesting show lined up for you, and actually quite a lengthy one, too. Nearly 2 hours of discussion. Well, actually more than 2 hours of discussion, but I did pare it back some, including a segment that I think took a little bit too much of a dark turn, so I might put that one up on Patreon, but trying to keep this episode a little bit lighter-hearted. Mostly it focuses on, it starts off with old gaming systems and retro gaming and talking about like grinding Diablo 2. But we do eventually get into the main topic, which is our expectations for 2020 or things we'd like to accomplish gaming-wise in 2020. And so Harmony Dragon and Sir Klaus and Ocho, Golden Flame all share their thoughts on what they would like to accomplish in gaming in 2020. Oh, and I'm in there too, at some point. Of course, we are now hosted on Anchor.fm, a new and much more social podcast hosting platform. You can find us at Anchor.fm/SSSH podcast and take advantage of some of the community features there. In particular, you can leave us voice messages. Would definitely love to incorporate those into an episode. And you can also like our episodes or the entire podcast itself if you're in the Anchor app. For those of you who do the smart home thing, you can find us on Apple HomePod and on Google Home. Try saying, "Hey, voice assistant, play the podcast Spam, Spam, Spam Humbug," and see what happens. And of course, as always, this episode of Spam, Spam, Spam Humbug is brought to you by our Patreon backers, patreon.ultimatecodex, if you would like to join their number. Thank you to everyone who already supports the podcast and the Codex by that means. And in particular, a hearty thank you to our co-producers, Seth, Golden Flame, Chris, Brickbat, Dominic, Violation, Cranberry, Christopher, Bruce, Dark Wraith Dragon, Helgruff, Gronk, Pascal, and Thorwan. All right, on with the show.
I can't tell you how many of my friends every year decide they're going to stop smoking or go to the gym or stop drinking or something that sounds realistic, but
well, it's too complicated, it's too difficult. I don't have the time. I didn't imagine what the challenge would be, and they drop it.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's something that we have. It's a personal challenge, so I'd say it depends on the person, not the concept. Yeah.
I bring it up because one of my goals / gaming things that I'm looking forward to this year, I sort of set myself up a New Year's resolution to go through every single one of the Final Fantasy series.
Oh,
every single one of the single player ones.
That's something. Especially for the older ones, I'd say.
Well, being old, we're all old. We're Ultimate Dragons.
Yeah, it's it's been some time. But when I was in college, I had a lot of time. Even if I worked well for my studies, I still had some time on my hands. And we were in the late 90s, and I used to have that nice Nintendo emulator on my PC, and
did a lot of that myself.
I played quite some early NES, and I can't remember how it's called in the US. The second Nintendo system.
We called it the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, so it's the same name here, Super Nintendo. And I played quite my share of Final Fantasy games, especially since some of them were never properly translated at the time for the Occidental market.
Oh, I know.
And I must say that, the early ones are very bare bones. Not unlike the early Ultimas, and you can say it's some funny thing, but my favorite Ultima is Ultima 6. Uh, it's the one that I love the most.
I hear that a lot, even though it's one that I've played very, very little of.
I think it's a mix of things. I'd say for me it's the last happy Ultima before entering the dark age of the Age of Armageddon with Ultima 7.
Well, I don't know that I would call Ultima 6 a happy game, given that it starts with a war.
Yeah, you have terrible things. We war with gargoyles. You have many people who are wounded. Shrines are captured and things like that. But still, it has that's little sliver of hope going through the game. Welcome. As you are progressing and discovering that they are not the enemy, they are not evil, you can discuss with them, you can find a middle ground, you can make amends, and bring back the things to some normality, some balance when you end the game with everybody having a lance, being able to access the codex, and seemingly peace. And then goes 200 years, and you enter the time of Ultima 7, where the gargoyles are exploited for the physical strength, and they have lost the land definitively. They are isolated and Tefin. There's this sect, the virtues have fallen. Well, it's not a happy place anymore. But that's another discussion. Final Fantasy VI, because obviously when I played it in college, Final Fantasy VII hadn't been released back then. Was the game that I loved the most of all the early ones, and it's a mix of the story, the tragic characters, and the beautiful music that was in the game.
Oh, absolutely.
And I did play Ultima, Final Fantasy VII, 8, 9, 10, and I think I stopped at that time because not that I was less interested, I just didn't have much more free time to play a longer game like that.
Oh, I understand. I really do. You see,
and in parallel of these Final Fantasy, I used to play the Dragon Quest and the Shukoden series. Which too.
That was a series I always wanted to play, but I never really got the chance to.
Shukoden?
Yeah.
You have, if you can, and if you can manage to have the free time to play it, I'd say play the 1 and 2.
Because my only access that I ever had to actually playing Suikoden myself was for a short time when I was living in Canada. The rental shop right next to the apartment that I and my girlfriend at the time lived in had a good selection of PlayStation games. And one of them they had was Suikoden.
Back in the day, oh my god, I had to say that, but 20 years ago, 22 years ago, it was very common in France to have used games shops. I guess things like that existed for you too. And back then, used games were cheap. Well, nowadays, when I go to a used game store, it's almost the price of a game on the shelf. Which
well,
especially why
go ahead. Yeah. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Please.
Well, especially these days, a lot of your physical game stores will make a lot of their money on, they call it the retro market. You know, selling old machine or old systems and old games. Like the local GameStop here, the last time I went in, they had for sale a bundle of an old Super Nintendo, Final Fantasy II, and Zelda: A Link to the Past.
Oh,
well, okay. I'm sorry, Final Fantasy IV, but it was titled Final Fantasy II.
Yeah, I remember the problem with import. And yeah, but well, it's more okay. Okay. No, it's in France we have almost nothing on return market in the GameStop-like shops. It's modern games like games for PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. But then, no, it's something like $10 under the regular price for games like that. And yes, you can find very old games in the Xbox One or PS3, PS4, Xbox 360 lineup at something under $10, but they are very, very old games for that.
Right.
Anything that's been released for the last, let's say, 2 years, well, regular price. Let's say you want to buy Zelda, the last Zelda for the Switch. It's been released with the Switch, almost,
Right.
and the used game price is almost the same that the regular price. It's something like $7 under the price. There's no point in that. If you want to buy a used game, you have to go on the secondary market, go on online shopping websites like where you would sell things, not like eBay, but things like that. And there you have a regular price. But yeah, back in the day, the price were almost at half price from regular price, sometime under. And I used to buy a lot of games for the PS2 and the PS1 in this shop and on PC too. And one of them was especially that Suikoden game, and I fell in love with it because it was an interesting mix for the day of RPG with some army management and things like that. And the Suikoden 2 is the best expression of that. They did other games after that for PS2, but it wasn't the same. The first two games share some characters between the games, and since they are in a very similar time frame, you have characters you meet in the first one, you meet again in the second one after some time has passed.
Right.
And you can meet the protagonist of the first game if you still have that save.
Speaking of saves like that, thank you for reminding me. And this does tie in with Suikoden. One of my really big favorite games that I played so much in the PlayStation 1 era was Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
And there was one boss, Psycho Mantis, who whenever you went to fight him would say that he would read your mind, which is to say that he read the first controller's button input. So to beat him, you had to put in controller 2.
That's something they don't do anymore.
But they also read what you had on your save or on your memory cards. And if you had anything by Konami, it's like, oh, you like Castlevania. Oh, you play Suikoden.
Yeah, that's something that was fourth wall breaking and was good. Things like that. But I guess they don't build them anymore like that.
Oh, and speaking of a blend of strategy and RPG, you actually hit on one of my favorite genres there, Klaus. There's one series that I was playing at the time, again, largely emulated, and also for the first one on the Sega Genesis. I believe they called it the Mega Drive in Europe.
Yep, that's Mega Drive.
It was the Longresser series, though I believe the first one when they brought it over to the US was retitled Warsong. Each of you had these various commander units who leveled up and got abilities of their own and statistics of their own. You could equip them to improve their combat abilities, but the big mechanic was that they could also each hire troops depending on their class. And depending on how advanced they were or what class they were, they also gave what the units that were within a certain range of them statistical bonuses. Ooh. So it was interesting that you could end up either having a character who was very, very personally strong, or one who wasn't so strong but was really good at bolstering their troops.
I'm just looking at it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there was Fire Emblem at the time. Well, not outside of Japan, but still.
No, the first tactical RPG that I met was Final Fantasy Tactics back then. But it's a genre that I don't play quite often.
Well,
Say so, because I usually don't have much time. I kept myself playing more classic strategy games like Warcraft and Starcraft on PC, and I played Japanese RPGs on consoles. Usually, that was my my go-to back then. When I had a go-to.
I actually still have a sizable rack or DVD rack of import games that I need to emulate simply to be able to play them because the PlayStation 1 was region locked, but I have the physical discs.
That's something that I did from the get-go. I bought a used up PlayStation 1 back then because I was in college. So. But one of the cheap things to do was to put a chip to be able to play whatever you wanted. So since it was very cheap to do, I did that, and I had the chance to be able to play many games that were not available in Europe. That was great. But when I wanted to do the same thing with PS2, the cheap price was 10 times the price that I paid for the PS1, so I didn't do it. And I just played regular games.
I remember the early disc-based market, though, was so weird. It was so silly.
Yeah.
I remember when the PlayStation 2 came out, and they had PlayStation 2s everywhere. You know, the Walmart had them. It's a local. Well, I don't know if they have Walmart in France.
No, they don't.
Big box department store is about the only way I can describe it.
Yeah.
With a built-in grocery store.
Yeah, we have different type of stores like that, but not Walmart. Something that you don't have, especially the Walmart exclusive they can have.
Right. I mean, they had them there. They had them in music stores who also sold games. They had them in even the local new and used trade or game stores there. But what nobody had were memory cards.
It was sometimes difficult to get by then for the PS2.
I actually had to contact an importer and pay twice the normal price to get a Japanese memory card for my PS2 for my very first one.
My first PS2 was a used one again, but it wasn't. I didn't buy it until many years later because I was very well stuffed with my PS1. And one thing I used to do again, it's made quite some time now, it's to ride on the tail end of a console. Because at that time, the game was still released. Some of them were not bad, but especially people were wanting to change console, to trade off the PS1 games to get cash to buy new PS2 games. And you were able to get very good PS1 games at very cheap price because nobody wanted them anymore. So I kept playing for quite some time after that.
I did the same thing with the Nintendo, and even before the Nintendo Entertainment System, I did that a lot with the Atari 2600. I had so many Atari games as a kid.
Oh my god, this takes me back.
You and me both. I had a huge Atari collection.
I think I still have my collection in a box collecting dust in our shed.
Did you have that infamous E.T. game?
Yes. And that's the weird thing. I loved that game. I didn't know it was supposed to be a crappy game.
No, me too. Yeah. No, it wasn't. I beat it many times.
Go ahead. No,
please.
One of my earliest childhood memories was sitting down for 8 hours with my sister. You know, handing the joystick back and forth because we were trying to see what happened if you maxed out your score in Yours Revenge. And we found out, you know, Mom even brought lunch and dinner out to us in the living room because she was watching this too.
Yeah.
And we got as far as getting it rolled over, and that's when we found out it didn't get stuck at 999 or it didn't give another number. It just rolled over, which was sort of depressing.
Yeah.
Back then, my parents couldn't afford to have to buy me a computer system. I had to wait a couple of years later until I got an Atari ST 520, I think. But yeah, the early Atari consoles, I used to play them when I was on holiday. We went to ski in the Alps, in the French Alps, and there was a computer club where we stayed at the hotel, and they had lessons to learn programming in BASIC, and after the lessons for us the kids, they got the consoles. And God, I played. Was it Centipede? Yeah, I think.
Oh, Centipede! Wow.
Oh, for quite some. Oh, I love that game. I love that game. The colors back then were just. It was just something.
Oh, you want to know something interesting? Something really interesting. The processor chip in the Atari 2600, the MOS technology 6502, it's the same processor that's inside both the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Commodore 64. They're just clocked at different speeds and different other parts on the motherboard.
Yeah, I can see it with Commodore 64 because they share some palette colors and things like that. But I feel that the NES they built something around that console that was just wonderful. When I was a kid, the NES was the first console I was exposed to, and in my stores, in my mall, they had a place where you could play the games that were demoed with the NES.
Right.
But it was something like there was a timer, so every time it reached something like 5 minutes of playing, the NES resetted and showed you the menu where you could select playing Zelda or Mario or things like that.
Right.
So it would be sure that nobody stayed too long with the controllers.
Yeah.
And it was frustrating because we were playing Zelda every time. 5 minutes after that, we lost the progression and reset it, and there's nothing we could do.
Yeah, speaking of losing progression, back to the PS2 part. I remember because when I got my PlayStation 2, I got 2 games with it: Metal Gear Solid 2 because I love the first one so much, and Final Fantasy X because even then I was a huge weeaboo.
Yeah.
And I remember playing through Final Fantasy at 48 hours ago and trying my best to leave the console on overnight when I went to work.
Because you didn't have that memory card.
Except we lived out in the middle of nowhere, and the power lines were so old that if they got a little bit wet from rain, which we get a lot of rain here.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the power would blink for half a second. That's just enough to reset a console.
Oh,
yeah,
that's a sad thing.
I suppose we probably should talk about what we're looking forward to this year as far as gaming.
Well, on that last note, I feel your pain. I used to live in a place where we had sometimes power surge. And sometimes we thought the graphic cards, sometimes it was the hard drive who took the brunt of that power surge.
That's never a fun thing.
No, the graphic cards, I can live with it. It's just a graphic card. But when you have progressed all over a game, you are in the last legs of a game, and your hard drive crashes and you have something like 60 hours lost. Well, let's say you have some games I've never finished. Yeah, especially Diablo 2. I just couldn't bear to replay all the things I did. It was a sad day.
And that's something I don't get is I would spend hours and hours and days grinding experience and grinding levels and grinding loot in Diablo 2, getting maybe 1 or 2 more levels, getting closer to fighting Diablo and later Baal. And, and I would probably have over 100 hours clocked by the time I finally beat the thing the first time.
Yeah.
And then I go watch speedrunners go through the entire normal Nightmare in Hell in like 3 hours, if that long.
Yeah. It's what you expect from your gaming experience. I love doing all the secondary quests, exploring all the maps, looking for every chest, everything in any maps, in any game. It's something that I like, even in MMOs like World of Warcraft. I wasn't in that rush to get that to level 60 when World of Warcraft was released. All I wanted is, hey, there's a path in the mountains, let's go where it goes. And I've lost very much time just exploring the world. So it was, yeah. And but back in the late 90s when Diablo 2 was released, there's so many good games that were released, but were sucking your time away from each other. So when I lost my save, I just say, whatever, I have so many other games to play, so let's play another one, rather than replay the 60 hours that I have already invested in Diablo. And I was just, it was Diablo 2 without the expansion pack. It was I was in hell. Yeah, I was getting the keys to get to Diablo. I had 2 out of 3, I think. And, well let's say I beat the game. Wouldn't get that better. So, as you said, back for 2020, what are your expectations, anticipation, predictions?
Well, 2 things that I'm absolutely looking forward to are games that we did not get in the United States or really outside of Japan that we're seeing releases of here. I mean, everybody who was a gamer in the late 90s, early 2000s, or who was into online gaming has heard of Phantasy Star Online.
Yep.
You know, the very first console MMO. Well, they had a sequel, which for the last 8 years now, has only been in Japan. Well, and the Southeast Asia market. They're finally localizing it into other languages and bringing it over. I've been looking forward to that for so long because, again, while most of my friends had a Super Nintendo, I had a Genesis, and I played all of the original Phantasy Stars. That was my jam. So seeing online versions of what I grew up playing, sign me up. I mean, it also kind of helps, again, like I've said, that I'm a huge weeaboo. There's something else that they're also bringing over that, again, we didn't get the first 4 in the series, and the 5th one we got, but the 5th one was the worst one. The Sakura Wars games. Think a cross between strategy RPG and dating sim.
Okay.
Where the first one took place in the late 1920s, early 1930s, where you're fighting in steam-powered battle mechs, fighting demons in alternate history Imperial Japan, and because they need psychics to drive them, your entire unit, except for you, the main character, are all young women.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept.
And their affection levels for you directly affect their stats in combat.
Of course.
Because Japan.
Yeah.
But again, I can't say much because, again, I have about this whole pile of imported Japanese games that are largely strategy RPGs, like specifically the Super Robot Wars series.
They were released on the Dreamcast too, these games.
Oh, yeah, they were originally on the Saturn and Dreamcast, you're right.
Yeah.
But but seeing the series reboot coming out, and they specifically announced it having an American release, I'm sure that's going to be worldwide.
Well, depends.
Well,
not always is it. Sometimes there's some US release we never get. It depends. It gets less and less, but it happens still.
I mean, I understand. I have quite a few friends who live in Brazil and speak Portuguese, but they still play the English language versions of games because they don't have them in Brazilian Portuguese.
a series of games I never played. I think there's one new game releasing 2020 is the Persona series.
Oh, yeah, they're doing a Persona 6?
Yeah, I saw something like that in pre-order on Amazon, and I said, why not?
I do know that they're making a Shin Megami Tensei 5.
I never got the relationship between the two series. I think they are related, aren't they?
Yes. The original series, the original Persona was called Shin Megami Tensei Persona. It was a direct spin-off. Well, not direct plotline based. Well, even then it kind of was, because there was a side story game to Persona or to Shin Megami Tensei 1 called Shin Megami Tensei If, and some of the characters from that show up in the very, very first Persona.
Okay. Yeah. Get it.
But then not long after the first two Persona games, they kind of started being less and less about, less and less like the playing like a Shin Megami Tensei, and more became their own thing.
Okay.
Now, if we're going to talk about Persona, though, there was a crossover they had with Fire Emblem that came out on the Wii U.
Fire Emblem. That's strange.
It's called Tokyo Mirage Sessions.
Yeah.
Basically, think Persona, only instead of summoning demons to fight for them, you're summoning characters from Fire Emblem.
I can't imagine the in-game situation. Well, I was just fighting with my army as a leader, and then I got infected all the world. Well,
it's Japanese. It's very, very...
Yeah.
And it all revolves around the Japanese idol culture.
Yeah, it's something that's strange for us, but, well, let's live with it.
Well, I'm sure there's things that happen and go on in French culture and American culture that the Japanese would think, what the crap about?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure about it. Are you waiting for Final Fantasy VII, the remake? I'm looking for it.
Kind of, sort of. This is going to have me labeled as a heretic, but I wasn't really a fan of Final Fantasy VII.
I get that.
It's not even that it was different and set in modern times. It was the forced minigames. You're trying to escape after your best healer and possible girlfriend just got stabbed. You're on the second disc. You need to get awake fast. Let's have a required snowboarding game for points.
I must say that I played the original Final Fantasy VII back then, but I don't know. I preferred, for the modern take, Final Fantasy VIII over Final Fantasy VII, and I love Final Fantasy IX, just the goofiness of the characters. Final Fantasy VII, for me, it's the first 3D game, but it couldn't compare to Final Fantasy VI back then. So, why not? But I feel that it's a generation thing. It's the first Final Fantasy outside of Nintendo, and it was one of the major releases of the PS1. So it's more. It has more qualities as a symbol rather than a game, I'd say.
Well, I also think that being that it was on the PlayStation, which wasn't so much marketed, let's be honest, Nintendo since the 80s always pushed their systems towards the family-friendly market.
Yeah.
Which is sadly why we didn't get many role-playing games outside of Japan for almost a decade. Because people thought, those are heavy, those are complicated, those aren't going to appeal to children. Or, worse, those are gory and those are violent. Parents will see their children playing that and have a heart attack. It was silly, because I remember renting a copy of Final Fantasy I back in the day when I was still playing just the regular Nintendo. And it came, the printed manual that came with the official, in the official box, had a walkthrough for the first half of the game. Printed out maps for every dungeon, listed what was in each chest, where each monsters would spawn, and what spells were sold in what towns, and what, listings of all the weapons and where you could find them, and all of that.
It was, I remember games being released like I think it was Blade Runner, the adventure game on PC, and it was released with the box with the clubbook, in case you were lost. It was not like other games that some games, because we are early in the 90s, were released with tutorials for first minutes of the game. Go there, do that, open the box, and yeah, we would just guide you through some basic action and let you live your life after that. But some other were released with complete game solution. It was strange.
Now compare the copy of Ultima Exodus that I rented. It did not come with a manual that had that such an extensive through. It basically listed it was basic controls. It gave a list of the races and what their stat maximums were. It said what classes were able to wear what armors and what spells they could learn, and that was it.
Yeah.
You had to figure everything out for yourself, like a proper freaking Ultima.
And it was, again, I guess that had the games been released with concurrently with Ultima 4, let's say, or Ultima 5, you would have much more information on the universe of Sosaria in the early games rather than what you got back then. But it was so early in the game industry. It's difficult to imagine how it was complicated to develop everything that would go around the game, being beyond just developing the game.
Right.
2020, a good resolution to make that call back to earlier discussion for me would be to actually finish a game. I hope to do one, maybe more this year, since I will have forced me much more free time that I should have. But yeah, I tried to finish first Jedi Fallen Order, which was...
I haven't had a chance to play that. I want to so badly.
I played quite some time, but we got Union Strike in France for the train, and I was very dependent on train schedules to go to my work and from my work to my house. And since the start of the strike in early December, I have to take the car every day. It's not a problem. It's not a long distance. But if I don't get up early and I get stuck on the road, so I have to get very early up. I get very early at my job, and I have to leave early too. Something like 2 hours earlier than I should. So yes, I stopped playing that game, but I enjoyed it. And yeah, it was an interesting game, not what I expected, but still, it's a good game.
I heard it largely summed up as Star Wars, Dark Souls with lightsabers.
I must say, I'm very bad. I'm very bad at everything that asks manual dexterity in video games. I sucked 25 years ago when I started playing, and I stuck till today. But, well, they have a setting for people like me. It's called story mode. And I quite enjoy it. Because even in story mode, you have to fight your way over monsters and things. I like puzzles and things like that. But the game's good. And you have still that things, because I don't want to say a curse word, about jumping in games. So I hated jumping in Ultima 8. I still hate jumping on platforms today. Sometimes it just frustrates me, especially in 3D environments. I can jump there. No, I couldn't. It was too
Jumping
far.
can be done well. Platforming is a thing. It can be done well. I mean, take a look at anything Mario.
Yeah, but it's in 2D.
Sonic.
2D, it's okay,
Right.
because you don't have that third dimension that can make things more difficult than it should be.
Even in 3D first person, jumping can be done well. Look at Metroid Prime.
Yeah. For the record, Ultima 9 did that good because you knew when you could jump and when you couldn't. You had that little hint that could help you. But yeah, no. The thing about the game is that it's really you don't have that many planets you have to go through, but you have to unlock force powers and think creatively to use them to go to places where you couldn't go before. And sometimes you try just to reach a place because you see there's a chest there or something that you want to get, and you just can't. Spend 10, 15 minutes to try every other options you have on hand and say, I have to come back later.
Well, that's kind of a depressing thing about modern, open world exploration games like that. And I'm glad you mentioned that. Is if you play more modern games, you will often see obvious visual cues. You need to use a skill or tool or item there. And if you don't have it yet, that's an obvious thing. Hey, I need to come back once I have what will open this.
Yeah.
Like the half pipes in Metroid Prime.
There's a lot of things that are read on your map the first time you get to a planet in Jedi Fallen Order. So you know that you have to get a new force power, and sometimes there's a place in that game where you have to have multiple different powers to reach the end of the corridor, because there's many different things you have to do just to reach that end. So you know that every time you come back, you try something new, you try to combine with something else, and you fail. So it's an endgame thing. But yeah, back in the day, it happened too. But you just had this. You have only finished the map at 80%. Today, you see where you can't go, and it's even more frustrating that just that number of map completion.
All right.
And what frustrates me the most in Jedi Fallen Order is that some maps are just huge in 3 dimensions, and you have no way to fast travel somewhere. So when you happen to return to a place where you were before, you have to travel all the way back to the place where you want to continue the exploration. Know that you have some new clue from the game or some new ability from the game.
Well, to be fair, in the original Dark Souls, until you got the King Soul, it was very much exactly the same thing.
Yeah, that is the reason why I don't play Dark Souls, because I couldn't survive 5 minutes. No, it's a good game. It's an interesting story. It brings up, of course, classic themes, but I feel that it ties up well in the new canon. And that's something that I like in that game. So yeah, I hope to finish it. And after that, I have 3 Witcher games that are sitting on my computer that I want to finish too. Because everybody is talking about them right now.
Not too long ago, I actually started to play Witcher 1. It's up along the same lines. I never actually played any of the Witchers. And the first day in Witcher was pretty rough, because Witcher 1 actually doesn't I don't know anything about 2 or 3, but now I know a little bit about 1. But it kind of has an identity problem, because it's like, you could play over the shoulder, or you could play an isometric perspective.
Yeah, Witcher 1 is a very strange game development wise.
Right, wasn't it sort of developed in the same engine they used for Neverwinter Nights?
Yes, it did.
Seems it, yeah.
Yeah, they hacked it much. I remember, oh my god. Back in the day, I subscribed to the information letter from CD Projekt Red. They even sent me a Witcher Christmas card. And well, I got the game when it was released, and man, it was a mess. But they did something wonderful with each of the game. They kept working on it until it was much smoother. And Witcher 1 is much smoother now than it was back in the day. but it's one of the game. I don't know why. It's just that I had so many games on my hand. I didn't finish it. I'm still have a save that I just fired up in late 2019, so I have to finish it once more. Oh, so many games sitting on the shelf.
The issue of the backlog, it is real.
Yeah, Witcher 1 is one of those games I timed out on as well. Although that's more to do with my not sure what the word I want to actually use here is, but I'm going to go with strong dislike of the Aurora engine and its various derivatives.
Oh,
yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
It felt like a hard barrier to entry for me as well, trying to figure out the combo system on it.
Just the combat in general. Oh my gosh, I just
compare the combat in Witcher 3. Oh my lord.
Witcher 1 combat is complicated. Especially since you can gimp yourself. I'm in a situation in the game right now where I have to fight, let's say, giant carnivorous plants that are shooting at me from far away.
I think I know exactly where you are. Yes.
And it's frustrating because I developed my character like I want, and I can get close enough to kill them, and I can shoot them from afar because my Igni sign is not that much developed. So I'm just running around and trying to find what I'm going to do next, and it's especially frustrating.
I mean, I still think the game came out at a time when frustration in games was kind of still a like they were built to be a little frustrating.
Well, especially for a European developer. For a European developer, maybe. Because, I think, because that came out kind of, that was a post-Ultima game, obviously, right? So we're kind of, we're post-Ultima 9. And to be fair, the Ultimas had actually been moving, the Ultimas had a strange relationship with frustrating mechanics kind of across the 80s, but as they came into the 90s, right? You think about something like Ultima 4 or Ultima 5, where there's a lot of grind, there's the food mechanic, and then you get Ultima 6, which is a cakewalk in a lot of those. You don't even need to level up to pass Ultima 6. To say nothing of the fact that, the food, the effect of food in that game is vastly diminished. Your characters can go days without eating, and the only real effect is that they don't recuperate health when they rest, but who cares, because Orb of the Moon's Lord British and done. Then Ultima 7 reintroduced the food mechanic, and that got a little bit annoying, but then it largely disappeared after that.
It's true.
And so,
wasn't really designed.
Witcher 1 was released in 2007. It's
right, and that's kind of my point, is that so we came the Ultima, and finishing out my point here is that you get to the end of the 90s, Ultima 9, that branch of RPG development had started to really sort of phase out the frustration aspects, and it definitely became more about story, and the exploration could really come to the fore, because those food mechanics kind of limit you in terms of your ability to explore unless you really, really stock up. Other aspects of the game had come to the fore in the Ultima branch. Now, in some of the other RPG streams that kind of came along at the time, thinking of the Baldur's Gates, that wasn't necessarily true, right? That, there was still the mechanics were definitely, let's say, a little bit harder core. You talked about the grind in Diablo earlier as well, and that's another sort of stream that kind of comes out at about this point in history. And, I'm thinking of, granted, The Witcher was developed by CD Projekt Red out of Poland, but I'm thinking of who are the Piranoites, right? German developers, and with some of the Gothic games, or then later Risen, right? Which have, again, sort of those somewhat more punishing mechanics in place as well.
Well, the Gothic, I feel, was a reaction to the then RPG scene. It's when you played games in the late 90s, early 2000s, we were going to a more middling road than we had seen before. And so there were so many genres, even in role-playing games. When you play things like Might and Magic, it's very different from Baldur's Gate or from my God, I lose my words. Which was anything from Fallout and things like that. But Witcher,
it certainly was a time of experimentation for sure.
Witcher tries something that's slightly different. That's introducing a more, how to say that, arcade-like action type of action.
Well, to the limits of the engine, yes. I mean, it's still you play it, and it's still like if you play Neverwinter Nights and then you play The Witcher, mechanically, like you see right there that the latter is a derivative of the former. You see it it's there in very stark ways.
But when you play Neverwinter, sometimes it can be a cakewalk. I remember playing that game and just being equipped with all the stuff. You were glowing Christmas tree at some point in the game with anything from two magic sword and magic armor and rings and things like that. You could just juice you up to the point where opposition was, well, just some slow bump on your road. Witcher, on the other hand, even on the easiest setting, some combats are just freaking difficult. Especially if you didn't do the best you could do with your character points to develop it, you'll just be stuck. And since it's a solo game, you don't have a party with you. You can rely on companions to help you too.
I really have to admit, when it comes to The Witcher, the massive bulk of Witcher that I played was the third game. It actually came with the PC I'm sitting at right now. And even though I love the gameplay, what hooked me on that was the music. CD Projekt Red did a wonderful job getting a band that was even named for a bard in the Witcher novels to do all of the music for the game. And it really fit so well. It was so very atmospheric.
About music, did you read that some fans made a mod to introduce in Witcher 1 some of the musics and songs from the Witcher TV series?
Nice.
I have seen.
No, I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, I've seen Toss a Coin to a Witcher superimposed on Witcher 3 footage on YouTube more than once.
And see, since I haven't watched the series yet, or I haven't experienced any of that in any of the games yet, I did see a meme not too long ago that basically said that you were supposed to sing that to "You can dance if you want to, you could leave your friends behind." So whenever I see the phrase "throw a coin to your Witcher," that's all I hear now.
That's hilarious. It probably does map rather well, though. Actually, on that note, one thing that was pretty cool was to stop throwing shade at Witcher 1 and actually throw it some credit where it's due. Yeah. The Ginny editor that shipped with it,
right.
Or I think they may have released it as a separate. I can't remember if they shipped it or if it was released separately. But it was their fork and enhancement of the Aurora toolkit. Oh, that was a sweet toolkit to use. Complicated as heck, but or at least I remember it being very complicated, but very, very awesome toolkit for like modding the game. So I'm not surprised that, people are still building Witcher 1 mods, and in particular to add now Witcher Netflix series music to the game. That surprises me not in the least.
Yeah, not a single bit, really. Yeah.
Yeah, no surprise. None. I have none surprises.
So no, I'm about 10 nights into the game. I haven't played it too much. That's how I keep track of my game time, is how many nights it takes to beat. But I'm 10 nights into playing the game. I just hit chapter 3, and I think I don't even know how many chapters there are, but a lot more than 3. So it's going to take a while to finish up.
Well, it took me 2.5 years to polish off Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, so come in under that and you're fine.
So 2020, are you expecting something great from CD Projekt with Cyberpunk?
Didn't I get postponed?
Yeah, to September.
Yeah.
No, well, okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Should release this year. I hope so.
I actually played the pen and paper game that Cyberpunk 2077 is based on.
2020?
Yes.
Yeah. That's our year.
I played so much of that in college. I was young and dumb and stupid and a bit of a pervert at the time. So my character, or pretty much all of my characters, had this one specific implant that, well, you get the idea. Anyway.
Cyberpunk was a product of a time, I feel.
Right.
It
was a weird time in
It's
sci-fi,
hard.
certainly.
No, it's just that one of the most complicated thing about near no role-playing games is that it ages not well.
Yeah, well, yeah.
There's another cyber type game that I love, which mixes fantasy, which is Shadowrun.
Shadowrun.
That was actually why I got into Cyberpunk over Shadowrun, because it didn't have magic in it.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
The two games are great. They have different flavors. But the problem for me with both games is that, they are a vision of the future from 35 years ago, and it doesn't gel well with what we have now in your current days.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
And Shadowrun tried to keep that by evolving the game, but still it feels awkward. They even introduced Wi-Fi in Shadowrun a couple of editions ago, but still, it's strange to have Wi-Fi appearing in Shadowrun in the 2060s, 2070s, while you have that for many years now.
Well, I think that's the whole future as seen by so long ago is kind of almost a stylistic kitschy thing these days. I mean, look how popular Fallout is, doing 2050 or 2250 in the eyes of 1950.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
But
This is true.
Yeah,
but at least with Fallout, like, they explain themselves better, right? Because, they're like, okay, well, what if the transistor was never invented? Like, what would technology look like, right? So there's like, this is all vacuum tubes and all of that stuff.
Yeah. They tried.
Plus, there was a nuclear war, so tech development kind of just stopped at some point.
Yeah. But Fallout used that to their advantage. While the other games, I understand where we come from. Okay? I find it still funny to read old cyberpunk books, and they are discussing because they used real world analogy, it ages not well. And when you, instead of using some games, you just use fake things like megaflops. So you don't have to say what a megaflops to a terabyte computer is, things like that.
Well,
But-
flop, I believe, is floating.
Yes.
Now we use flop as
Yes,
a...
no, but back then it wasn't a word, and they
Right.
tried to distance themselves from real world analogies. But when you read a game that's a supercomputer, it has 250 megabytes of hard drive. Yeah, it's just so.
Whoa, slow down there, Chief.
Yeah.
250, you don't want to use that all at once.
No, yeah.
It was funny, but that's one of the issues. I'm curious how they reconcile that futuristic aspect of cyberpunk with all we had before. I'm
That's
curious.
kind of a problem when you have a game that's trying to simulate near future sci-fi.
Yeah.
Mhm.
When time marches on.
Yeah.
One of my favorite examples of that, I just dropped a screenshot in the recording schedule channel. I should have put it in topic, but whatever. Eagle Eye Mysteries was a kids game developed by Stormfront Studios, released by EA. And I mean, I played the hell out of that game. I loved Eagle Eye Mysteries growing up as a kid. It was fun because you take the role of Jake or Jennifer Eagle, and you are basically a youth private eye solving youth type crimes in your hometown in the first game. In the second game, you're visiting some family in London, and so you're solving mysteries there. But whatever. And it's, a lot of it's just like, typical like kid stuff, late 80s, early 90s. So like, imagine like, you're basically like, oh, well, someone stole Marty McFly's skateboard. Who done it, right? Like that kind of stuff, okay? It's a kid game. But interestingly, the characters, and you can see Jennifer Eagle in the screenshot I posted here. I'll have to, I guess, include a link in the show notes now. She's holding a tablet-like device, and you can actually see like the screen of the tablet, and it's got some buttons there, and there's like It had a camera on it, so it had like data entry, and it could store like notes, and it could take photos and things like that. It's very much like, if this was, a 2019, if this was actually happening in 2019, she'd have an iPad or like a Chromebook or something, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But it's, again, it's one of those things. The Eagle Eye Mysteries games, I think, were like early 90s. So it's, again, interesting to see them sort of imagine where tech might go. And in some ways, they're not wrong, right? Like, there's been that strong move towards the portable computer tablet-like device. But, their impression of it with like actual like physical buttons and all of that stuff obviously is not in alignment with what we actually have now so much.
There is also a good bit of recursion too. I mean, look how much of our modern tech was based on stuff that we got ideas from Star Trek. You think we would have
Hey, Motorola Razr.
It's art. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't think the flip phone was based on the original the communicator from original series Trek?
No, not at all. Not at all.
But the thing with going back, a few topics to Cyberpunk, I'm kind of, here's the thing. A game that hyped, no matter how good it is, and I bet that it's going to be great, is going to live up to expectations. Whenever you have a game hyped that much, it's going to not meet expectations, and despite being maybe even a 90% game, people are going to hate on it because it wasn't a 95% rated game.
It's complicated.
Probably
these days. I mean,
it's like making a new Star Wars game, or it's like making a new Star Wars movie.
Oh, that's a can of worms I'm not sure we want to open.
No, but like
that's kind of his point, though. Yeah,
it's like there's going to be people that love it. There's going to be people that are like, hey, this is actually all right, and then there's going to be the people who, and like it's always. The term that Mythic used, and I believe this was Warhammer specific, but it's the grognards, right? It's it's the people who are coming to Cyberpunk from that 30 years of pen and paper experience, and now they're seeing, this adaptation of a thing that they have known and enjoyed in that older format or in that, original format. Now it's, of course, being presented to them in a completely different format, and even if it's even if under the hood it's mechanically faithful to the systems and mechanisms particular to, the Cyberpunk pen and paper game, because a lot of those pen and paper mechanics actually do map to sort of the behind the scenes calculations of game engines, even if it's rigorously faithful or as faithful as possible to, like those mechanics, and even if it features, all of the elements that you would really expect in the world. If you had deep experience with Cyberpunk, there's going to be people who are, and maybe this is okay, boomer, right? Like it's going to be one of those moments. It's going to be like, oh well, still it's crap for reason.
Oh.
And
we can go back to E3 2019 here. Remember all of the completely people losing their minds when Keanu Reeves showed up for the Cyberpunk 2077 reveal.
Half
Johnny
the internet was so
Silverhand.
Happy.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm Cyberpunk, and I mean the game, not the genre, has been dormant for many years. The RPG game, we tried to restart the line early in the 2000s with Cyberpunk 2030. And it was a mess, and they dropped the ball back then. And it's, I guess, while I love the genre, it's something that we saw with Deus Ex recently, but it's not something that is very much developed on the market. As we said before, usually we have games that are set in the far future, or in a fantasy world, or in a different version of a world with steampunk and fantasy, or modern games. But Cyberpunk itself, it's something that not very many people have experienced with the genre, and I'm curious how they'll compare it to other games that exist, and not to what it is meant to represent.
Well, in the RPG space, I don't know if it's going to have too many direct comparisons because there's not a lot of cyberpunk RPGs out there. I mean, there are Shadowrun-based games.
Shadowrun and Deus Ex, mostly.
Yeah. Deus Ex might be a point of comparison.
But again,
I had another one in my head, but it's fallen out. Like, I mean, in terms of, sort of expanding out into other properties, Blade Runner might be a point of contact as well.
yeah, but Blade Runner, the game, it's...
I know that's an adventure game, not an RPG.
Yeah, and it's quite old again. It's not the same generation. The generation that will play Cyberpunk will mostly look at it like futuristic.
Detroit. That was the game that I was going to mention.
Oh yeah.
Detroit Become Human.
Yeah. Oh, but it was actiony, I think, more than
it is more of an action title, and but like a lot of really heavy choices in that game.
I feel that what we saw of the game make me more think of a Rockstar game rather than something like GTA, rather than an RPG or something like that. I don't know. I'm curious. Since you're playing with the underworld very very often in the videos, I don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah, hard to say. I mean, it could wind up being like a GTA 5 with sci-fi.
Well,
yeah,
but that could happen.
No matter what it is, somebody's going to be disappointed, though. I mean, the grognards of the pen and paper game aren't going to be happy unless it fits not only the pen and paper mechanics, but the specific edition that they're most comfortable with.
Well,
it won't be because they already announced that they are re-releasing. It's complicated. Gosh, that's also
it always is with old game systems.
No, the thing is, the original pen and paper RPG editor is releasing a new edition of role-playing game, which is Cyberpunk Red. And Cyberpunk Red is not set in the decade of the game, but it's set after 2020, which was the original game most people played, and before Cyberpunk 2070. So
it's not a real Cyberpunk, it's crap.
Well,
so yes, it's going to be something. So you have the original game, which Grognard played, a new version of the role-playing game, which is set something like 2 decades before the game that will be released. So I don't get why. I mean, you could want to play in the same sandbox. Why set it 20 years in the past? I don't get it. And most people will play the game because we are in 2020 and not in 1995 are not grognards. They are people who are exposed to many other games. So they can just release a game and expect that the brand Cyberpunk will mean anything to anybody as a brand, not as a genre. So, well, I don't know.
And that's a sad thing is, and also one can compare it to other games, is often the most popular game in a series or in a genre is not going to be popular to the original fans that got started. I mean, I guarantee you that there's going to be people that are stuck on the fact that, well, actually, Johnny Silverhand is dead at this point in time. This is 50 years after all the blah, 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 blah.
No.
Compare far and away Assassin's Creed 4, which was the most probably arguably one of the most popular games in the series.
I just bought that for my Switch.
I can't recommend that game higher. The music, I would spend hours just sailing around listening to and singing along with the shanties. One choir boy to another.
Well, they end with the parting glass. I mean, come on.
Exactly. And
that song still makes me cry.
Oh, indeed. But what gets me about it is that fans of the first game and the Ezio trilogy hated on it because he's not an assassin, he's a pirate. You don't play that game stealthy at all.
I know I didn't.
Well, granted, it was a lot easier and faster and more convenient rather than being stealthy like the game suggests you do in certain points.
Right. But that's
murder everybody.
But that's that's flavoring though. I think that's also kind of a bit of the time. Is they're like, okay, maybe this one's not as stealthy. He's a pirate, so we're gonna make him Right, a little more actiony as people would really want. I actually just completed
Quite.
that game just this past year, so I finally got to the fourth one.
And people would argue that it has almost no connection to the earlier games and the overarching story, especially everything to deal with Desmond Miles. And they're not wrong. However, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because when a series gets long and you need to understand all of the games that have came before to truly appreciate what you're doing, that makes it hard for new people to get in.
It gets a little much, yeah.
Case in point, Kingdom Hearts 3. You cannot just play Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 and understand even a third of what's going on in Kingdom Hearts 3. There were not only just games, but like audio dramas and books and so much.
So many things going around the game, and yeah, you have to have everything in a hand to. But that's an issue with how you develop the game. I mean, if you have to, it's the same problem with Star Wars. If you have to read anything beyond the media you're consuming to get the story, that's a problem.
Well, that, and also I think they're developing games nowadays so that people can just jump in. Like, they're not developing games almost ignoring anything that came before in a series at all. They really want you to play this one, to buy this one. You know, like,
yeah,
that's not necessarily a bad thing, though.
Yeah, it's a good thing that you can. It's being inclusive of the fandom, because not everybody can have the time to read. I mean, when Star Wars was rebooted, I started to read everything that came out, but sadly, well, I don't have that time anymore, and there's so many books I'm behind, and people are discussing the situation in the Star Wars universe. Says, yes, in that series of books, they discussed of that clue, and there's one line in that chapter. I get it, but I don't get it, because, well, you can't expect me to get that reference in that movie, or in that TV show, if I didn't get to read that. But it's working the fandom, but only a fraction of it in your product. That's not very good.
Quite so. I mean, having little tie-ins here and there is one thing. I mean, I would argue that the Ezio trilogy was amazing and tied in together so well, but arguably you really didn't need to play Assassin's Creed 1 to play Assassin's Creed 2. You really didn't need to play Revelations Brotherhood. Sorry, you didn't need to play 2 to play Brotherhood, or Brotherhood to play Revelations. I mean, you got more out of the games, but you could still play them on their own.
Just reading what Winston the Fury said. The Avatar is another problem. It's an interesting issue, because the first 3 games are pretty good, because you don't have that much of an experience as an avatar. It's never implied that it is you again. It may be you. It's what's said in the manual. So it excuses the question that you may ask, especially since it's not mandatory to ask this question in the process of discussing with the NPCs. But when you are in the last game and you are billed as the veteran of the situation, and you are asking the same question that you were asking to the game 6 games ago, it's not the same thing. Yes, being inclusive to the new players, but that's what a manual or what in-game encyclopedia is for. Your character don't ask questions; you give them that kind of answers.
Well, and
you don't broke that dialogues with making it like you're an amnesiac. I get it. I get why they do it.
Oh, and I agree with you. We've argued this point so many times. I mean, granted, it wasn't until I think it wasn't until 5 that they really started saying you were the same avatar as the. Well, it wasn't. Well, 5 was the first game where you were obviously the person from the last game. It
yes,
wasn't,
in 5 you are summoned back to Britannia. It's explicitly said that way.
but I don't think they explicitly stated that the avatar was a stranger until 7. And
No, the stranger thing, the stranger discussions is retcon is in Ultima 6 when you go to the shrines of the gargoyles. When you meet Monday in Minax and Exodus, it's clear that they know you and that you are the one who kicked their ass.
Fair enough. Again, excuse my limited.
No,
I'm
okay.
not playing 6.
Yeah, that's when they started retconning everything together, and it created issues. But that's another discussion for another time. Yeah. So to the topic of today of 2020, yeah, I hope that Cyberpunk will be a good game. Will it be a major release, which will be a game that will be praised by the critics? It's too early to say. Yeah, I hope we don't have some issue with CD Projekt Red, because I loved everything that they released until now. So let's cross our fingers.
Well, and again, I guarantee you it's going to be a good game. But I'm reminded of a story from when I was a young kid that was in one of my like 2nd or 3rd grade reading books, and that applies, I think, to gaming or to any long-standing franchise. A mother was going to be making the family's favorite type of stew for supper, but every member of the family, and there were like 4 or 5 children, the father, the mother, an aunt, and such, who all came to her and said, "I love that, but could you please leave out this one thing that I don't like?" And with every single person saying, "Please leave out this one thing," the mother, being a smart aleck, when it was supper time, brought out a big boiling pot of water.
Yeah, that's true.
Because everybody is going to find something they don't like. Like, again, the Grognards are going to complain how it's not like that it's not like the original 2020. The Shadowrun players are going to complain, "Where's the magic?" or that net running isn't like decking, or people who are used to the original, not so, because let's face it, the original Cyberpunk 2020 game, while it was Cyberpunk, it was kind of kitschy.
It was very kitschy because it was the name of the game. Talsorian didn't do it to be serious. They did it to get things like oh god, I hate to say that, but things like boobs and guns.
Right, because literally one of the classes was not so, not Bard, but Rocker Boy.
Yeah,
you literally had the superpower of granting, bringing up crowds by having a jam session in the middle of the street.
Yeah, but Rocker Boy with your classic solo was quite strange, even back then.
Yeah, but it had really interesting ideas as far as the way the skill system worked, and the fact that you could basically cheat the system by literally uploading skill programs, but that was never as good as taking the time to learn a skill could be.
As much as Cyberpunk 2020 and Shadowrun had, in my opinion, the same base gimmick. You were one unlucky punk fighting against the system. That was the thing. Can work well, but I expect your character to have interaction with more than just other people on the streets. I mean, we'll see. Is there another game that you're looking for 2020?
Well,
or another thing in the gaming genre?
Yes, there actually is. There's another game series that I actually mentioned earlier was being brought over to the United States. Well, brought over in general, that it's been being advertised so much by Nintendo. The Longrisser series. They're bringing over the first and second games on Switch. They're a classic series of strategy RPG games. I was telling you about them earlier. They're localizing and bringing over the first two games, as a compilation on the Switch. And I am so looking forward to that because I remember playing poorly fan translated ROMs of them way, way back in the day.
Yeah. They're releasing that on March 2020, looks like. It's what they say on my online shop. This looks like a cute game on the sprite aspect.
Right. One thing I remember about the games, at least the very first game, it had a feature similar to the early Fire Emblem games where if one of the commanders died in combat, they died.
Oh, yeah. So it's permadeath.
Yeah.
That's something that you don't see anymore that much.
Yeah, I think the first of the Fire Emblem series to make it optional was Awakening.
So you can lose the game by losing all your army leaders.
Well, yeah. However, one of the things, at least, was that it gave you enough of them to where you weren't necessarily, well, at least the first game, right?
But since they are, I'm just looking at some picture here. Since they have a story going on behind that, it looks like I guess that your protagonist can't die, maybe.
Yeah, I think the protagonist dying is a game over. I know it was in Fire Emblem, but I don't remember for Langrisser 1 and 2. But
that would be logical. If it's permadeath and you lose with your protagonist, you get back to your save. But yeah, I don't have access to my Switch right now. My kids have principal access to the Switch. Last time I tried to put a game on it, they weren't happy. It's all console.
My Switch is mostly, well, these days, since I'm playing so much on the computer, my Switch is mostly used while I'm waiting for medical transit to take my mother and or I wherever, or waiting for the bus to take us back.
Yeah. The Switch is used both as a transportable device and mostly with the TV right now.
Well, and I will give Nintendo a lot of credit because that is an amazing niche that they dug for themselves with it.
That's the reason why I don't get the new Switch Lite. I feel that it's less interesting than previous product.
Well, compare the 2DS, the 3DS that didn't have.
Yeah, but 2DS and 3DS, it's more of a gimmick of the 3D, which is not very useful. But Switch, the concept of being portable and still being able to play on your couch, on your TV, that's something that's very, very, very different. I feel it's a better combo than 2DS, 3DS.
And that came in very useful back, up until recently where I just got done finishing Pokemon Sword. Was, again, I was playing it mostly on the TV one, doing that because my eyes aren't great, but when needing to go for a medical appointment, myself or mom would, hook up the Joy-Cons and, pull it out and, just keep playing without ever turning the machine off.
Yeah, that's something but yeah, as I said, the new Switch Lite, which you can't remove the Joy-Cons and you can't send the picture on the TV. They're competing with their own product, and it's not the other Switch. It's the Nintendo 2DS. But then again, the 2DS has a better battery life, is more portable, has a huge library of games. I don't know.
Nintendo's had a habit of doing a lot of making new editions of the same console, either to be slightly larger or at a cheaper price point or similar.
True, but when you had a revision of Nintendo Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, Game Boy DS, anything that was released up until the release of the DS was an upgrade or a slight variation of the same, but didn't break an advanced version of what it was to get something lesser. I mean, when you move from black and white Game Boy to color Game Boy, and then the ability to have that Game Boy I have a second screen on that Game Boy. Things like that. You didn't get. You get a sense of progression, which is something that we don't. Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Advance SP, and after that the DS and the 3DS. With the Switch Lite, I feel they tried to cash in the success of the Switch by bringing out an inferior product. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
But again, like I said, they had a habit of. I remember having the original gray brick Game Boy.
Yeah.
And then I had friends who had the Game Boy Pocket.
Yeah.
And I remember then they had the Game Boy Color, which was backwards compatible. And then out came, I forgot what they had. I think they had a Pocket Color, or was that the Neo Geo? I can't remember. But I remember they had the Game Boy Advance, the funky shaped one.
Yes, the first one.
And then they had like different versions, like the Game Boy Advance SP. It was largely the same machine, but it didn't. And then it got silly with the DS, where they had the DS, the DSi, the DS XL. I think they had a DSi XL. And people who relied on their DS also having a Game Boy Advance port were upset with the DSi because no more GBA port.
Yeah. DSi was no. I think the DSi still had the GBA port. It's after that, but the 3DS had no GBA port again. But yeah, I get the point. The thing, one of the reasons I moved from my classic Game Boy Advance to Game Boy Advance SP was because a very new feature that existed, which was autopause in the game. I mean, in some games on the Game Boy Advance SP, when you close the lid of the game, it would just pause the game. You didn't have to stop the console from playing or find a save point, which is very important in some role-playing games. And back in the day, I was playing the Golden Sun series on it. And when I was traveling, I was on a holiday, I could just play the game until I arrived to that point where I had to disembark from the boat or from the bus and just close my Game Boy Advance SP, and my state would be saved until I reopened it. And that would be in between game saves. And that was something new and very interesting.
Welcome back.
Yeah. But yeah, let's see. Do you think that we'll know more about the new PS5 and new Xbox consoles this year?
We might, but I guarantee you I probably won't have one until 1, 2, maybe 3 years into the life cycle.
Yeah. What's interesting is that they changed the way they approach these new consoles. Back in the day, retrocompatibility was not really a thing. And they are battling themselves nowadays. I think it's interesting.
Well, I guess I should get my own thoughts on 2020 in before, my son wakes up again or my wife gets home or whatever.
Yes, do.
I'm kind of in Ocho's boat. I would like to finish a game, maybe Mass Effect Andromeda, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. Is just
It's true. Beating games. Yes, we should actually complete the games that we purchase. Yes.
Well, that, but I mean, like, it's it's just it's hard, man. It's hard. I've got 4 kids and a boatload of responsibilities, and it's like I can steal an hour here, an hour there, and
even when you don't have that much of a schedule, there's so many good games coming out, especially
I've just
like Game Pass now.
You know what? Actually, I've discovered a really great solve for that. Which is that, so my gaming rig, such as it is yes, I will continue my thought. But the thing that I've discovered is that, so
in 2019, in 2019, I finally finished that second Dragon Age game.
What, DA2?
No. Yes, I had a save since the 8 years before, and I finally finished DA2 and started DA3. And
Nice.
stopped playing it because I didn't have the time. I wanted to try something else. But
I started on DAI as well. I've never finished it.
Yeah.
Neither have I.
Yeah. I'm gonna finish Kingdoms MLR in 2020.
There you go.
That's
You'd like that one.
I'd have to restart the game from the get-go because it's so many years since I played that game. But that's an issue when you play a game. You don't play a game for quite some time. You're advanced in your progress, but you don't have the skills anymore to progress well.
Literally my problem with Mass Effect Andromeda. Like, the delta in my saves is, I think the last time I played it, like, I just picked it up and played it again a few days ago, and the last time I played it before then was like March.
Yeah, that's the thing. Some of my games I have some games that 1 year, 2 year, 3 years between saves, and sometimes it's just too much. You are in the middle of a quest with a lot of combat and things like that, and you enter the game. You don't know skill rotation. You don't have that muscle memory for dodging the adversaries and things like that, and just too much. Sometimes just too much.
Yeah, it was hard. Like, it took me a day to just rehabituate to. I mean, fortunately, the Mass Effect games haven't changed too much, and I played the heck out of the first 3, so a lot of it did come back fairly quickly. But it took like a day to just rehabituate to. Oh, okay, this is how the cover system works, and right, this is what my gun even does. I do love the crafting system in MEA because it's so fun to just make like my current main weapon is a sniper rifle. It fires 3-shot bursts, and because of the mods I have installed, it has the classic heat. I crafted it with the classic heatsink, so it has infinite ammo. And then on top of that, I crafted it with another modification that makes every round it shoots into a sticky grenade. So it is just the best thing, because like when I fire it, it treats each round like a sniper rifle round. So when I hit something, that something takes damage as if it just got hit with 3 sniper rifle bullets. But then if somehow it's still alive, they're also sticky grenades. So it's just like bang, 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 boom, boom, boom. It's wonderful. It's so OP. It's hilarious. But that's just MEA's crafting system. And it's funny because, of course, having played Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, now playing MEA, you can tell that some of the designers moved over to, like, after Big Huge Games was shuttered, some of those designers did get snapped up by BioWare Montreal, Ian Fraser among them. And you can it's got some of the same fingerprints, it's got some of the same DNA, and like you can kind of just see it, and it's hilarious. Because you could do that in Reckoning too. Like, once you got into the crafting system and you figured out like how the different gems worked together as you were crafting weapons, and the different components that you had to, utilize to craft weapons. Once you figured that system out, you could craft just like some ridiculously OP weapons. I had one where I had one sword where literally like, if I could get an enemy down to about 10% health and then close in and kill him with the sword, the physics engine basically scaled the force. Like, so when it did like the ragdoll animations, the physics engine would scale the amount of force that went into the ragdoll based on the amount of damage past the point of death that you did. So if I could get an enemy to within like 5-10% of death and then close in and kill him with my sword, it was like, I'm Babe Ruth going up to bat. What goes up does eventually come down, but I have no idea where it landed.
It's Fallout-like when you kill some mobs. That was one thing. The gory animation of Fallout 1 and 2 in combat, just so great.
Yeah, see, and Reckoning didn't have that. Like, Reckoning, they didn't gib, right? They didn't gib out, but it was just like, all of a sudden you just see their body just like literally like I'm Babe Ruth and I'm hitting a home run, and I think they went over the mountain over there. I don't know. Maybe I'll find the body later. I don't know. They're just walking around. It's like, hey, there's random loot on the ground. What's this all about? Oh, it's a monster I killed 6 hours ago. Whatever. But yeah, if I can finish MEA, that would be a goal. And I mean, like, for me too, I think I'm just basically, I've decided that I'm splitting my gaming in twain. Because, of course, I travel for work sometimes. So I've got some travel coming up I'm going back to North Dakota next month, February, although it might be, depending on when this episode comes out, I might be in North Dakota. No, probably not. I got a couple more little mini episodes of SSSH lined up, Golden Flame, your commentary on Ultima 9's coming up, and then I've got my own thoughts to share as well. But we'll probably be into February when this episode comes out. So, yeah, I may already be in North Dakota. I don't know. I got to actually look at a calendar to figure that one out. Still, headed there for a couple of weeks. And I probably won't be bringing my gaming laptop along because carrying 3 laptops is just... And it all has to go in carry-on.
Yeah.
It all has to go in carry-on, right? I can't... Because they all have... If any of them had removable batteries, sure, fine, whatever. I'd happily throw them I'd take the batteries out, keep those in my backpack, throw the rest of the laptop in my stowed gear. But no, that's not going to happen. It's all non-removable stuff. So I'll bring my work laptop and I'll bring my little Acer Spin 1, and that'll serve as like my personal laptop for emails, Discord. Maybe we'll do a podcast recording. I don't know. But of course, I've got the Switch, and that is, that's much better for gaming anyways than a 15-inch laptop screen on a cramped little Embraer jet. But that said, coming back to the point I was going to make earlier, the one thing I've discovered about keeping my ambitions in check when it comes to new games coming out is, my Asus, it's a good laptop still, it's an Asus UX501 VM, I think is if anyone wants to actually look up the deal that it is. It's the business class variant of what would have been a couple, the ROG Zephyrus a couple of generations ago. But, so, it's got I think it was 4th gen Core i7. It's got, I think 8 gigabytes of RAM, and it's got a GT960M for its graphics. It's an all-around system, but it is getting a little long in the tooth, and you can even see that when it plays Mass Effect Andromeda. But on the other hand, if I keep myself on this thing until I literally run it into the ground, then at some point I'm just going to be like, well, you know what? I can't even run that game. So it is not on my radar.
Incorrect.
Well, guys, I don't know about you, but
yeah, it's
probably think about packing it in.
Yeah, it's
it's 1:30. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, at least
7:30.
I'm getting tired. Yeah, you might. Are you working today, man?
No, it's Saturday today. I'm doing the taxi. Yeah, my kids have many activities on Saturday. Start with,
tell me about it.
So tennis, and after that it's dance, and after that it's karate, and after that they are invited at a birthday party. So it's gonna be a long, like every Saturday.
Busy Saturday for sure.
Yeah, but it's gonna be good.
Nice.
I'm just curious to have your opinion, but on another day maybe on the on the next phase of Marvel movies.
Oh gosh, I almost feel after Endgame that I could just be done. Right now, my interest level is fairly minimal.
Yeah, I'm very curious about things like look into the past, like for this Black Widow movie, on anything that will look at things that happened before. I think there's things like the how it's called. Not the Falcon, it's the other series with the.
Well, there's Falcon and Winter Soldier. There's the Hawkeye one, although I expect
Hawkeye one,
that one wind up being canceled.
Yeah, it's
Jeremy Renner kind of went nuts there.
Yeah, it's problem.
There's WandaVision.
Yeah.
Well, you're saying the actor for Hawkeye went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs?
Just Google Jeremy Renner news recently. It's kind of
it's a sad thing.
He's a bit of a dirtbag.
Yeah.
Allegedly, he's a bit of a.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I don't know if they're going to keep that going.
Yeah. Okay. Enough said.
Yeah. So I don't know if that series is going to happen, but yeah, there's Falcon and Winter Soldier, there's WandaVision, and
it's a
there's
sad
a Black
thing
Widow movie.
Because I really
aren't they incorporating the X-Men into the MCU now?
Yeah. They are talking about incorporating the Fantastic Four into the MCU too.
The reason I'm big about wanting to see the X-Men in the MCU was they were my starting point, my stepping stone into being a fan of Marvel, largely from the 1990s cartoon when I was a kid.
I'm just waiting for a Nightcrawler movie. Really, that's about it.
I don't know.
That might be worth it.
Well, we've already had 5 Wolverines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started reading Marvel in France. It's different because we don't have comics issues for each single series. It doesn't work that way. Usually they collect them, but they collect them not how to say that. Back in the day, you would have an issue of Spider-Man with an issue of Iron Man with one issue of Fantastic Four, all in the same printed book. And there was one release. Yes. And so when I didn't discover something very different because there was 3 kind of publication like that.
Oh, so something like a trade paperback almost.
Yes, but instead of having a single story, you have a part of each of the hero stories. So there was Spider Magazine, in which you had Spider-Man and other backup feature around Spider-Man. You had Strange. Strange was the magazine in which you had Iron Man and other things. And you would have Nova, which was the one in which you had the Fantastic Four and maybe Spider-Woman and things like that. So you had to buy 2 or 3 each month to have all the Marvel heroes. And the first one I got on my hand when I was a kid was Nova, and I discovered the Fantastic Four. And for many years, Fantastic Four were my go-to team, way before Avengers and things like that. Because all the other features in these books were single heroes, like Spider-Man or Iron Man, which back in the day was the start of Rhodes as Iron Man, not Tony Stark. I discovered Tony Stark only later and yeah, I really wish for a good Fantastic Four introduction in the MCU. It's a very different kind of team rather than Avengers and things like that, because it's more about family and the close ones rather than a team of very different people getting together against some monster. I must say we may kind of have that with Incredibles, but yeah, I would like to see MCU treatment. But
We'll see.
we'll see. Wishful thinking.
All right. Yeah, well, yeah.
People, it was great to talk again.
Yeah, good chat, good chat.
Yeah, it's been a rough
long.
2019, so let's hope for a better 2020.
Oh my gosh.
Here's hoping.
I'll drink to that.
If you want to join the Ultima Dragons, you can do so at udic.org, where you can choose your very own dragon name. You can also find the Ultima Dragons on Facebook. We have a Facebook group there. And you can follow at Ultima Dragons on Twitter, or join them on Discord. And if you're feeling really old school, you can even fire up a Telnet client and check out the Weremount. Hit up the show notes for links to all of these. If you want to participate more directly in the podcast, you can send us an email, or if you're feeling a little bit braver, leave us a voice message in one of 3 places: the podcast website, our Facebook page, or on anchor.fm. And you're also welcome to join us on our Discord server to chat with us, to lurk, or even contribute to podcast recordings when they happen. And again, links in the show notes. If you'd like to support Spam Humbug, you can do so at patreon.com/ultimacodex, where for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to episodes the day before they go live to the general public. You'll also get access to behind-the-scenes audio when we have some to share, and possibly other interesting content. But we also welcome your moral support. You can like the Ultima series on Facebook, follow at Ultima Codex on Twitter, or leave the podcast a review on iTunes. And you're also welcome to share our episodes with your friends and social media circles. Spam Humbug is a production of the Ultima Codex. You can find show notes online at spamhumbug.com. Thank you for listening, and until next time, be virtuous.